My brother stole our late father's tools and sold them for cash, so I took the inheritance he never knew existed and watched his life fall apart. And for as long as I can remember, I've been the one cleaning up my family's messes. It's almost like that role was carved into my bones. My dad used to say, "Son, if you start something, you finish it, right?" He lived by that code. My younger brother, Jason, couldn't have been more different. Where I saw responsibility, he saw restriction. Where I saw pride in hard work, he saw wasted time. Growing up, Dad and I spent countless evenings in the garage, the air thick with the smell of oil and sawdust, the rhythmic hum of the lathe, the squeak of his old stool. The way sunlight hit the dust floating in the air, it all felt sacred. That was our church. He'd hand me a wrench, say, "Don't just fix things, understand them." And somehow, that lesson stuck with me far beyond bolts and motors. Jason, on the other hand, was always chasing quick money and attention. He'd brag about flipping sneakers or crypto before disappearing for weeks. He'd mock me for spending weekends in the garage with Dad instead of doing something that actually pays. But Dad never stopped trying to teach him, even when Jason clearly didn't care. Then came the heart attack. Sudden, brutal, one moment, we were talking about building a new workbench together, and the next, I was standing in that same garage, staring at his empty chair. The silence was unbearable. When we went through his things, I found his old toolbox, battered, heavy, full of memories. Those tools had belonged to his father before him. To anyone else, they were just metal and wood. To me, they were everything: his hands, his lessons, his legacy. I promised myself I'd keep them safe. No matter what, after the funeral, I spent most of my evenings in the garage. It was the only place that still smelled like him motor oil, cedar, and faint traces of the cologne he wore every morning before work. I'd sit on his old stool, running my hands over the worn handles of his tools. Each scratch told a story. The hammer he used to fix the back porch, the wrench from my first car repair, the chisel from the cabinet we built together. They weren't just objects. They were memories preserved in steel. Jason didn't visit much after the funeral. When he did, it was usually with a fake smile and a quick glance toward Dad's belongings. One night, as I wiped grease off my hands, he leaned against the doorframe and said, "You really gonna keep all that junk? You could sell half of it and make a decent buck." I stared at him, trying to understand how someone could be so detached. "They're not for sale, Jason. These tools mean something." He chuckled, shrugging like I was the foolish one. "Meaning doesn't pay bills. Bro, Dad's gone. Maybe it's time to let go." The words stung more than I expected. I turned away before he could see how angry I was. I didn't want to fight, not then. Instead, I just whispered, "You'll never get it." Over the next few weeks, I caught him lingering in the garage more than once. He'd run his fingers along the toolboxes, pretending to admire them. But there was always a glint in his eyes. One that didn't look like nostalgia. It looked like calculation. Still, I convinced myself he wouldn't dare. After all, these weren't just Dad's tools. They were part of who we were, or at least who I thought we were. It happened on a Sunday morning. I'd just come back from running errands, a cup of gas station coffee still warm in my hand. From the street, I noticed the garage door slightly open, something I never ever left undone. My stomach tightened. I pushed it open, and what I saw made the world tilt. That the shelves were bare. The workbench was stripped clean. Every wrench, hammer, chisel, and so gone. The toolbox, the one my father engraved his initials into. The garage didn't even smell the same. It was hollow, lifeless, like the heart had been ripped out of it. I called Jason immediately. "Did you come by the house?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He sounded half asleep. "What? No? Why?" "The tools. Dad's tools. They're gone." He paused for half a second too long. "Maybe someone broke in. You should call the cops." But something in his tone, flat, disinterested, made my blood run cold. Later that afternoon, my neighbor, Mrs. Ruiz, knocked on the door. "I saw your brother earlier," she said, frowning. "He was loading boxes into his truck. I thought you were helping him move." My throat went dry. I didn't even thank her before storming toward Jason's apartment. He opened the door with that same fake grin. "Where are they?" I demanded. He rolled his eyes. "Relax. They were just tools. They were Dad's tools." I snapped, my voice shaking. He didn't flinch. "Dad's dead, man. You're clinging to ghosts." I needed the money. That sentence hit harder than any punch. My vision blurred, and I felt something inside me break something I didn't think could. Jason didn't steal, just metal and wood. He stole the last piece of our father I had left. And in that moment, I realized there was no fixing this. Not anymore. After that day, something fundamental between us snapped like a wire pulled too tight for too long. I didn't yell. I didn't go to the police. I just left his apartment in silence, my fists clenched so hard my nails cut into my palms. The entire drive home, I kept hearing his words echo in my head. Dad's dead. You're clinging to ghosts. I couldn't step into the garage anymore. It felt like walking into a crime scene. Every empty shelf mocked me. Every faint grease stain reminded me of what used to be there. I tried to tell Mom, but she just sighed, her voice trembling. He's your brother. He made a mistake. Don't turn this into a family war. A mistake. That's what she called it. Not theft. Not betrayal. A mistake. I remember staring at her, unable to speak. How could she defend him? Jason didn't just take something valuable. He took something sacred. And yet, somehow, I was the one being told to forgive. Weeks passed. Jason started showing off his new investments. On social media bragging about flipping some quick cash into a small business idea. Seeing those posts made my blood boil. The man who sold our father's tools was now profiting off the legacy he destroyed. When I confronted Mom about it again, she whispered, "Please don't hate him. Your father wouldn't want that." But what would Dad have wanted for me to just let it go? To pretend his memory didn't matter? I couldn't do it. I started avoiding family gatherings, stopped answering Jason's calls. Every time my phone buzzed, I felt the same mixture of anger and grief. I thought cutting contact would dull the pain, but it didn't. It only made the silence louder and the hatred sharper. A few months passed before anything changed. Life had become a dull routine work. Sleep, repeat. The garage stayed locked. I couldn't bear to open that door and face the emptiness inside. Then, one afternoon, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Mr. Thompson," the voice asked. "This is Richard Langley. I'm your late father's attorney. I'd like to discuss a matter related to his estate." For a second, I thought it was some kind of scam. "The estate's already settled," I replied. "There's a sealed letter your father instructed us to deliver 6 months after his passing," he said. In person, I drove to the law office the next day, my stomach twisting the whole way. Mr. Langley handed me a small brown envelope with my name written in my father's handwriting. My hands shook as I broke the seal. Inside was a short note, simple, direct, and so him. "If you're reading this, I'm gone. You've always been the steady one, the builder. Jason was born with potential, but you carried the weight. There's something I never told either of you. Years ago, I set up a trust fund meant for the son who would preserve what I built. You'll find the details enclosed. Use it wisely, and remember, legacy isn't about money, it's about respect." The papers inside confirmed it, a sizable inheritance, nearly $250,000 held in my father's name. Jason's name wasn't mentioned once. I sat there, staring at the signature at the bottom, tears blurring my vision. He had trusted me with his final lesson one. Jason never deserved to learn. As I drove home, one thought kept circling in my mind like a vulture. Jason doesn't know this exists, and maybe he never should. That night, I couldn't sleep. The letter sat on my nightstand, staring at me like a question I wasn't ready to answer. I kept rereading my father's words, "Use it wisely." Every time I did, I felt the same surge of pride, followed by guilt. It wasn't just money. It was trust. It was proof that Dad saw who I really was, the one who stayed, the one who cared. But then came the whisper in my head, the darker one. Should I tell Jason? He'd stolen from our father's memory, led, manipulated, and sold the only tangible pieces of his legacy. Part of me wanted to believe Dad's gift was justice. The other part of me wondered if keeping it a secret made me any better than him. I tried to push it aside. I buried myself in work, avoided family calls, even ignored Mom when she said Jason was trying to make amends. Then one afternoon, I ran into him outside a coffee shop. He looked smuggled chain, designer shoes, acting like the world hadn't just watched him crash and burn online for his failed business. "Hey, bro," he said, grinning. "No hard feelings, right?" I've got a new project coming up. You should invest. We can make some real money this time." The audacity almost made me laugh. "You already made your money off Dad's tools," I said quietly. He shrugged. "That was business. You gotta move on." That's when I knew there was no remorse, no reflection. He'd learned nothing. That night, I sat down, signed the trust documents, and accepted the inheritance. But I didn't touch a cent. I wanted to wait, to see if Jason would ever grow up, to see if karma would do what I couldn't, because deep down, I knew. It always does. It didn't take long for karma to find him. Within months, Jason's new project started falling apart loudly and publicly. Word spread that he'd borrowed money from friends, even from one of Mom's church acquaintances, promising impossible returns. His so-called investment firm was nothing but a shell of fake paperwork and bravado. I found out through a mutual friend who texted me, "Your brother's in deep. People are talking about suing him." At first, I ignored it, but curiosity got the better of me. I checked his social media posts that once flaunted luxury cars and flashy watches were now replaced with defensive rants about haters and loyalty. The comments were brutal. Everyone he'd conned was turning on him. A week later, my phone buzzed. Jason and I stared at the screen, debating whether to answer. Against my better judgment, I did. "Hey man," he started, his voice trembling. "Listen, I need help." "Just a short-term loan, like before." "Before," I repeated coldly. "You mean when you sold our father's tools and called it business." He went silent. Then he sighed. "Look, I messed up, okay? But I've got plans to fix this. You always had the cash help me this once." I almost told him about Dad's inheritance right then. Almost, but instead, I said flatly, "Sell something else, Jason. That's what you're good at." He started cursing, accusing me of being selfish, of abandoning family. I let him finish before hanging up. That night, I sat in the dark garage, staring at the empty workbench, feeling this strange mix of satisfaction and sadness twist inside me. For the first time, I realized I didn't need to lift a finger. Jason's world was already collapsing, piece by piece, by the time summer rolled around. Jason's downfall had become small-town gossip. People whispered about him in grocery lines and local diners. Even Mom couldn't hide from it. Neighbors were calling her, asking if it was true that Jason had borrowed money he never planned to return. I tried to stay out of it, but somehow I was always pulled back in. One afternoon, I got a frantic call from Mom. "They came to the house," she said between sobs. "Two men saying Jason owes them thousands. They wanted me to pay." I drove over immediately. She was shaking, holding a crumpled piece of paper handwritten IOU with Jason's name scribbled across the bottom. "He said you'd cover him," she whispered, her voice breaking. I clenched my jaw. He what? When Jason finally showed up that evening, he looked exhausted, eyes bloodshot, clothes rumpled. "I just need time," he said. "They'll get their money back." "You dragged Mom into this," I snapped. "You used her name." Again, he threw his hands up. "I'm doing my best, okay? You think you're better than me just because Dad liked you more. That hit a nerve." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "Dad didn't like me more. He trusted me because I never sold him out." Jason's expression twisted into rage. "Oh, please. You think you're some saint. You got that inheritance. Everyone knows about it." My heart stopped. "What?" he sneered. "Yeah, people talk. I know you've been sitting on Dad's money while I'm drowning." I didn't confirm or deny it. I just stared at him, watching the realization flicker across his face that maybe, just maybe, he'd guessed right. For the first time, Jason looked scared. Not of losing money, of losing control. Jason's life unraveled fast after that. His so-called friends stopped answering his calls. Creditors started showing up at his door, and his car, his prized possession, was repossessed right in front of our mother's house. I watched from across the street one afternoon as he stood there, arms crossed, pretending not to care while the tow truck drove away. But his face, his eyes betrayed him. He looked hollow. The house felt different with him. There, like every room, carried the tension of unspoken anger. He drank a lot, muttering under his breath about bad luck and ungrateful people. Mom tried to comfort him, but I could tell even she was beginning to see him for who he really was. One night, she called me and whispered, "Can you come over? He's not okay." When I arrived, the house was dark, except for the faint light spilling from the garage. I found him sitting on the floor, staring at the empty shelves where Dad's tools used to be. A half-empty bottle sat beside him. "I shouldn't have sold them," he said quietly, not looking at me. "I thought I could make something of myself, but his voice cracked. I just wanted him to be proud of me, you know?" For a moment, the anger drained out of me. I saw the scared, broken version of the brother I grew up with, but it was too late for pity. The damage was done. I wanted to tell him about Dad's letter, then to give him some kind of peace, but I stopped myself. He wasn't ready to hear it. Not yet, because sometimes hitting rock bottom isn't the end. It's the start of the reckoning. A few days later, Jason showed up at my apartment unannounced. He looked worse than ever unshaven, pale and jittery, like he hadn't slept in days. "We need to talk," he said, forcing his way inside. "I know about the money, man. Dad left you something, didn't he?" I stayed silent. He paced the room like a cornered animal. "You think I don't deserve it? You think I didn't love him?" "Jason," I said carefully, "Dad didn't leave that money to punish you. He left it to honor what mattered to him, his legacy." He slammed his fist against the counter. "Legacy? You mean those damn tools? The ones I sold because you were too sentimental to use them?" I stepped closer, pulled the envelope from the drawer, and handed it to him. "Read this." He hesitated, then snatched it out of my hand. His eyes darted across the words, his breathing growing faster with each line. When he reached the end, he froze. "This can't be real," he muttered. "He left everything to you." "It wasn't about money," I said quietly. "It was about respect, about understanding what those tools meant. You failed that test the moment you saw them as a payday." Jason looked up, eyes blazing. "You knew this the whole time. You sat there watching me fall apart while you had this—" "Yes," I said, "because you needed to learn what Dad tried to teach you your whole life." He threw the letter down, shaking his head. "You're no better than me," he hissed. "You just hide behind righteousness." I met his glare, calm and steady. "Maybe, but at least I can live with what I've done." He didn't say another word. He just walked out, slamming the door so hard it rattled the frame. And I knew whatever brother I'd once had was gone for good. After that night, Jason vanished. He stopped answering calls, deleted his social media, and cut off everyone except Mom. She told me he'd moved to another town to start over, but her voice cracked every time she said it. I wanted to feel relief, but all I felt was A storm had finally passed, but the damage still lingered. For months, I avoided the garage completely. Then one weekend, something pulled me back. Maybe it was guilt, maybe closure. I stood in that empty space, sunlight bleeding through the dusty windows, and for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt clarity. Dad's tools were gone, but what he'd built, his lessons, his work ethic, his belief in doing things right, that was still in me. That's when the idea came. I used a small part of the inheritance to restore the garage. I scrubbed the floors, repainted the walls, and replaced the old shelves. Then I added something new, a plaque above the workbench that read, "In memory of a man who built more than things, he built character." Word spread, and neighbors started stopping by. I began teaching local kids how to fix things, bikes, furniture, little projects. Every time I handed a wrench to a kid and said, "Take care of it," I felt closer to my father than ever before. Mom visited one afternoon, tears in her eyes. "He'd be proud," she whispered. I nodded, finally feeling peace settle in. That's all I ever wanted. But even then, I couldn't shake one thought: the story wasn't over. Because if life had taught me anything, it was that unfinished lessons have a way of circling back. And Jason's lesson wasn't done yet. It was almost 2 years later when I saw him again. I was in the garage now, the community workshop, showing a group of kids how to sand down an old chair. The sound of laughter and tools filled the air, a rhythm that felt alive again. Then, through the open doorway, I saw a figure standing by the fence. Jason. He looked smaller, thinner. The cocky spark in his eyes was gone, replaced by something heavier. He waited until the kids left before walking over, hands in his pockets. "Didn't think you'd want to see me," he said softly. I didn't answer right away. I just studied him, trying to reconcile this quiet man with the reckless brother who once burned everything down. "You clean?" I finally asked. 8 months, got help. Working at a hardware store now. Funny enough, he gave a weak smile. Guess the universe has a sense of humor. We stood there in silence for a while, the air humming with unspoken words. Then he reached into his bag and placed a small wooden box on the workbench. "Found this at a pawn shop, upstate," he said. "Cost me a month's pay, but it belonged here." Inside was one of Dad's old wrenches, the one with the faded engraving on the handle. I ran my thumb over it, and for the first time in years, my chest didn't ache. "Thank you," I whispered. Jason nodded. "I can't undo what I did, but I'm trying to build something, like you would have wanted." I didn't forgive him completely that day, but as we stood in the workshop, surrounded by the sound of life and purpose, I realized maybe redemption wasn't about being perfected, it was about finally learning. Dad was right all along. Legacy isn't about money or things, it's about what you choose to rebuild after everything's been broken.